Okay, real quick, and for those that, for you guys other than Chelsea, we do a whole unit on that, but it's endocrine is a very complex system, and it's particularly relevant in repro, perhaps more so than any other. If you think that of the six major pituitary hormones in the anterior pituitary, three are strictly repro based, and certainly at least the other three assist it. So it's very much oriented toward that. Because whether it's growth hormone or adrenocorticotropic hormone or thyroid stimulating hormone, their functions are so central to a lot of body processes, including repro. So let me start with that. So I'll do this now. This way I can get you Dr. Hillick for 2 weeks and I don't have to. Don't look at me like that. That way I don't have to leave the house. I can leave the house an hour later. The dog was up. He had to go at 12:30. I do at night. When you gotta go, you gotta go. And then of course he's whining again at 5:30. I think his stomach was upset. So I had out again. So I've been up since 5:30. Endocrine. Okay, we're doing just we're doing the nervous system in advanced phys right now. Nervous system is all about rapid. Endocrine is all about less rapid. Less rapid means not slow, but more prolonged. So nervous system, fractions of a second, microseconds. Endocrine can be seconds, minutes, hours, days, longer. Okay, months. Depends on what it is. So, and how does it work? These are hormones, which by definition are chemicals that traverse mostly by the bloodstream with some limitations and basically go to specific target organs. Sometimes like growth hormone, the entirety will be target organs. And so we study that. And so this is the difference. And inevitably, physiologically, long duration, short duration, rapid means short duration, slowly means long duration. And so, and relatively long distances as well. And so this is reproduction, growth and development, kidney related, bloodstream related, metabolism, defense related, everything. Not we'll go back into endocrine being ductless and things like that. It's an interesting. It has a fairly consistent. I didn't put my marker. I did. It's a pretty consistent arc that we have. We have bloodstream factors. So levels of certain chemicals in the bloodstream, for the most part, they target basically, effectively this. They target the blood-brain barrier is weakest in the hypothalamus. So that's where it senses whether it's negative or positive feedback oriented. The hypothalamic measures those levels, whether it's glucose, whether it's sodium, whatever the chemical is, whether some of these reproductive chemicals. Then the hypothalamus, the extension of the hypothalamus, okay, of literally a portion of your brain protrudes a tongue-like depression called the infundibulum, if you remember that from the anatomy part of the program. That there's like a bulbous enlargement at the end that produces neurotransmitters and is adherent to what we call the pituitary gland. Actually, it's the posterior portion of the pituitary gland. So the posterior pituitary is much more nervous system. So it can secrete its own neurotransmitter. So we'll put neuro next to it. And basically what it produces are the major hormones go directly in the bloodstream are oxytocin and vasopressin, also known as antidiuretic hormone. Those are effectively neurotransmitters that are secreted. They are relatively short chain peptides, so they're not fat soluble. And then the other things are called release factors. So you have release factors and inhibitory factors. So they're either going to uptick or downtick production by where they're all going to. The release factors, the anterior pituitary, which is truly endocrine, glandular in nature. and produces 6 major players. Use the abbreviations: human growth hormone, adrenocorticotropic hormone, thyroid stimulating hormone, HGH, ACH, and then 3 that are dedicated to reproduction. FSH, follicle stimulating. Follicles mean eggs and sperm. LH, luteinizing hormone, which means estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, and prolactin. Other than lactation, nobody really knows for sure, but it plays a role in all of this. I call the big 6. Got to know the big 6. I mean, are there other agents they produce? What was Dr. Hillig talking about? There's a production of a particular opiate like an enkephalin, or yes, no? Is that ringing a bell? I'll check. Hey, she's more up on the stuff than I am. So, endocrine, by definition, directly into the bloodstream. It's fast. It reacts. Exocrine ductal system. Perspiration, classic example. Endocrine, when something goes in the bloodstream, it reacts very quickly. I do not know whether any of you have had an intravenous injection of anything. Okay? If you have, it boom. If you see the movies with the drug addicts and they're bang, and that hits their vein in fractions of a second, they're in la la land. Whatever the drug of choice for them is that are there. It's remarkable. The best thing is for folks of my day and age, if you've ever had surgery, they used to use something called pentothal, sodium pentothal, which is a thiobarbital, meaning it works extraordinary. It's an ultra-fast acting barbiturate. They'd have you count back from 100, 199. You didn't get to 98, you're down, you're out when they injected it. Now they use something even faster called propofol, which, because it has less side effects, they can put you to sleep and wake, and it doesn't last very long, so they just have to keep giving it to you and wake you up. Unfortunately, the problem with that is if you overuse it, it can kill you. One Michael Jackson, very famous singer and very strange ranger. Okay. Michael Jackson fans?
Sure.
So I don't know. Is there anybody more popular in music today than Taylor Swift? Probably not, right? He was there for X amount of time. The Bee Gees were there for a couple of years. Everything they did, they had to ban them. They had Bee Gee free weekend because every hit song was one of theirs. They were all great, by the way. So, a little music historically. Shall I go backwards? Okay. So all of that's part of this. So I think it's important to give you some context why I'm doing this. So endocrine glands directly into the bloodstream, typically rapid, not like the nervous system rapid, but rapid nonetheless. So that's the first nugget that's there. We're going to do this again, and I'm not going to do it. It's very small. It's why we don't do it in anatomy. There's no anatomy really to speak of. And the distinction here is whether they work, chemicals that work on the same cell that secretes them, which happens particularly in the gut, or ones that act in surrounding, para, meaning next to. And those are interesting in and of themselves. This is the big deal. Are they amino acid based or are they steroidal based? Because they work differently, okay? And the steroidal based ones, because of their ability to go through membranes being fat compatible, it can have a greater impact on a lot of systems. And that's the good news. They're fat soluble. That means they're so detectable. If you wonder with performance enhancing drugs, that's why they're relatively easy to find with testing. And I'll talk about the icosanoids have to do with those are local agents down the road. All the things that they can do. So there's a lot, literally a myriad of things that occur, whether it's mitotic activity, secretory activity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The whole idea, with the exception of thyroid hormone, which is made from tyrosine. And again, it's like 2 tyrosines this way, one up, one down, with some iodine, either 3 or 4 iodine staple on it. It's very symmetrical. So again, the distinction between polar covalent and non-polar covalent for molecules allowing them to pass through a fatty membrane is symmetry. That's what non-polar covalent is. Symmetrical, it doesn't matter whether if they're made of something that's water soluble, like an amino acid, the very fact that they are arranged in a symmetrical, balanced fashion creates effectively a non-polar covalent. So it's an oddball. Stein's rule number one, always remember oddballs. Remember exceptions. It's easy. It's like negative feedback. Everything is negative feedback other than the exception. So if they ask you, what mechanism was this? It's negative feedback, unless it's one of the ones you remembered as an exception. Saves time, saves testing time. Lipid soluble, okay. Genetic activation, transcription, translation. I'm not going to do the whole, we'll do this again. G proteins, phosphodiesterase, blah, blah, blah. All that stuff, I've seen this a zillion times, and you'll see it again. Again, remember that calmodulin, you guys, coming up on the exam. They're having the first exam, smooth muscles, calmodulin.
You're doing it in person?
Yes.
Oh, that's weird.
Oh, it's going to be. I'm looking forward to it.
Are you? I don't think we did that one in person.
We did.
Did we?
First one.
Oh, we
You
did.
guys were threatening to kill me. Haley was not going to talk to me for like a week.
No, I thought that was anatomy. Where we all did that on the third one.
Oh yeah, you were all horrible.
Oh, okay. Horrible.
Yeah, it's all right.
It's been aggressive.
See, I think there was a scheme to send Haley in because she knew we had she could get to me.
Hey, I got you to do everyone online after that, so
The two of you were a team.
I knew it worked.
They send me pictures with their masks on.
That worked.
I'm showing my wife. She goes, can you believe these two? She goes, oh, they're cute. I'm like, no. Lena, you're very quiet. Yeah, practice was long. Oh, God. You're going to go someplace warm. Spartansburg?
Yeah.
Sorry. I know the route. If you tell the bus driver, I'll give you my sister's address. You can stop over and meet her. And my brother-in-law, and maybe they can bring the kids and the grandkids in. Charlotte. Because you kind of go right through. Charlotte's a really pretty city.
No, you are right. I did do that. That's last year.
Yeah, not so good. Okay, moving on. This is where the lipid-soluble ones, very, very significant, and all the things they do. And I'm not going to go, and we're not going to rebuild it because we're going to go over this again in class. But I want to get to and the negative versus positive feedback. So I do want to show you a little bit of what goes on. So to understand that we can trigger these in effectively three different ways. When we get to the autonomic nervous system, which is our next system, that's what your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems do. They can trigger the release of a variety of different neurotransmitters directly that impact your system. That's neural stimuli. Classically, the adrenal, but not the exterior of the adrenal gland, the interior, which is really not an endocrine gland. It acts like an endocrine gland, but really it is not, anatomically speaking, an endocrine gland that are there. And this is the one we're looking at more. One hormone stimulating the other. Okay. Hypothalamic hormones stimulate release or inhibit release of the anterior pituitary hormones. They go to target organs. This, what they call, whether it's the arc or the feedback loop, whatever the authors tell you about it, that's really important. And so here you can see what goes on, whether a tropic or releasing hormone. So, and you will see the one we're going to look at now is GnRH when we get up there. And then there's a variety of different things that can override it, okay, that are part of it. And so we look at the different things with regard to how well they bond. And then again, basically hormone levels, it's interesting. When they're not as abundant, The receptors are more sensitive. When they're overly abundant, they're less sensitive. So there's an internal control mechanism sort of to prevent overload or enhance times when there's a limited amount, which is interesting. So, and we're going to get to all of that. And there's a variety of different ways that they're degraded. And we'll get to that. So this is the idea. In the nervous system, fractions of a second. Here, seconds to hours. And then a lot of this is based on their half-life. So we begin to look at these that are there. Okay, not doing that, I'm not doing that. I wanted to go into this portion of it so you understand what's going on. This is what I was talking about before. Anatomically, this tiny stalk of nervous tissue, and this is what, if you recall the way I presented anatomy, this is the neuroendocrine link. This is our brain basically communicating with our endocrine system, making adjustments rapidly through the nervous system, making adjustments longer term through the endocrine system. And so these are neurohormones, the fancy name we get. So we hear the term hypophysis. It has to do with the pituitary. So one is nervous, one is glandular. And one is posterior, that's nervous, anterior is glandular. And so the connection comes through this, okay? And these are the areas where this blood-brain barrier, the two hormones, very famous. Again, they're peptide-based hormones. They're not steroidal. Oxytocin, particularly, it's involved in a variety of things, particularly stimulating. And it's positive feedback through the birth canal for vaginal birth versus antidiuretic hormone, which is fascinating. If you did not know, antidiuretic hormone is more than just retaining fluid. And there's some disease states that are associated with it. Its presence and the feedback aspects of it are interesting. Antidiuretic hormone stimulates other areas in and around the pituitary. We make both of these genetically. Pitocin is genetic, oxytocin, and it's called DDAVP. DDA indicates the genetic basis of it. VP is vasopressin. That is utilized by injection, and for instance, with people with clotting problems. And my ex-wife had a variant of von Willebrand's disease, and before she had major surgery, they had to give her this so she would clot sufficiently. We'll talk about that in the blood unit. So it's fascinating stuff. In the pantheon of what I call doctors, you have cardiologists, pathologists, just to name a couple, and endocrinologists. Very smart. So here's the look-see, what it looks like. These are the nuclei that are significant in sensing these variety of different levels. And again, most of them are negative feedback. The blood supply is very elaborate, and these are the idea they're releasing and inhibiting hormones. Here's the oxytocin, the positive feedback, antidiuretic hormone. A lot of different things will trigger it as well. Because when you're in pain, when your blood pressure, because it's designed to raise blood pressure, certain drug agents will do it as well. And they're just giving you a quick look-see. And we'll talk about this in lab. When they talk about growth hormones, the word tropic. So effectively, to me, with the exception, even human growth hormone itself, these are all tropic, to my way of thinking. They all cause growth. I mean, its name is growth hormone. Prolactin, again, is least understood in an oddball. Let's see if I can get you where we're doing insulin growth factors. Here we go. It's based on a variety of things. So if you have a lower level in the bloodstream or a low level of glucose, or you've just ingested a meal with high amino acid levels, basically that's going to cause GHRH, growth hormone, releasing hormone from the posterior pituitary. Okay. And the opposite is true. Increases in growth hormone, or what they call insulin-like growth factors, and we'll get to those. Basically, they go in the opposite direction. And hunger plays a role. There's an oddball hormone called ghrelin, which has to do with hunger. I think I'm blessed with an abundance of that. And they just show you the loop that's there. And then we'll talk about that. Those are famous pictures. Thyroid hormone, okay, same deal. Okay, and it has to do with levels of thyroid. Thyroid's interesting as you get older, unless there's a strong basis to look at it. I had these tests done recently when I had my this physical I had 2 weeks ago, and what occurred, they're checking thyroid, stimulating hormone 3 thyroid levels, because you want to see, and basically they're all controlling metabolic rate. We don't, the idea that we do not understand metabolic rate is highly, that we underestimate it. To me, it's like the analogy to me, and I'll say it again in class, like it's like an engine idle. So if your car is tuned up and working great, and you turn it on, it's just, you can hear it. It goes, that sounds great. I mean, if it's coughing and sputtering, that's low thyroid levels. It's just not going as rapidly or as efficiently as it should. And and all the, not that you guys would ever do this, not Ben. When you try that car in the racing car and it's like that, that's hyperthyroid. I managed to get quite a few tickets. My eldest was on a first name basis with the traffic court judge downtown. Okay. Oh yeah, and he still got a ticket.
Who's out of bed?
He just kept going in there. It was very nice. He just wanted to try to not get the points. It's great. This is what happens if you're for those who are interested in military life. You always you have your driver's license, and as you're getting it out, you flash your military ID and hope they cut you a break. And it's worked a lot. Surprised he doesn't get a speeding ticket for the ship. You're going 40 knots in a 35 knot zone. And so they're showing you the arc that's there. This plays a role as well, the adrenocortical, because as you will find out, and you asked about it before, there are hormones that are produced. This is where testosterone-like precursor substances are produced in women within the the exterior portion of the adrenal gland, as well as aldosterone and cortisol. So, and they all, and they're stress-oriented. So we look at this as well there, and I'll talk more about it. This is what I wanted to get to for you. Gonadotropins. And again, we understand these better than prolactin. FSH and luteinizing hormone, the ones we looked at in that chart, secreted by gonadotropic cells of the anterior pituitary. Yeah, it means eggs and sperm. Luteinizing, mature. And they notice the role. Mature follicle, ovulation, that's the luteal surge. Much more active post-ovulatory for increasing amounts of estrogen and perhaps more so progesterone post-ovulatory. And in males, testosterone is pretty straightforward. Like I said, the hormonal arc in men is a lot. You won't see a whole lot of questions about that MCAT wise. They're going to use the type of things we saw here. You might get some standalone type questions. Absent from the blood in prepubescent boys and girls. And it's all about this GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. There's no gonadotropin, quote unquote, inhibit. There's no GnIH. So that's one that's going to come at you. What suppresses it is just an abundance of gonadal hormones. And it's the most unique system because how does puberty occur? Why is it do? And frankly, it's occurring earlier. As you may not believe. Okay. 60 plus years ago when I was in that stage, it happened a little later. Okay. And whether this is chemical compounds in the food supply, which a lot of people suspect, okay, or whether there's just been a subtle degree of evolutionary change, perhaps. I think it's more of the food additives and things like that have increased the likelihood. It's changed a lot of different things. And the boss. Okay. She's on her way home. Shortly on her way home. The cat's unhappy because I wouldn't let him out. It was too cold. And I didn't know if she'd be there until He'd be out for 5 hours. Oh, 'cause he's annoying. Insist on going at 10:30 last night. I went back at 11, didn't want to come in, went back at 12, finally 12:30, he's banging on the door. Okay, so this is the big player. Notice, prolactin, not clearly understood. Yes, milk production in females, not understood well in males. As you can see, there is an inhibiting hormone that comes from the posterior pituitary, and interestingly, dopamine, which is a neurotransmitter that's basically confined to the brain. And again, it's not classically understood. Increased estrogen levels stimulate prolactin behind breast swelling and tenderness during the menstrual cycle. That's understood. Toward the end of pregnancy in preparation for lactation. Suckling stimulates it, again associated with lactation. So, and this is the unique factor. This is one of my test questions for you guys coming up. What we see in endocrine tumors, for whatever reason, is inappropriate lactation, both in men and in women, and it's a giveaway that you better check for a pituitary tumor. It's an oddball, frequently associated here. Inappropriate lactation, menstrual problems, infertility and impotence, all of those are things that are associated with. So that's, let me see if I can get you down in, that was the first one, right? Let's get the second one. So I downloaded. Here. So I'm giving you a fast track on this because there's a lot of this stuff that goes on from here. It's one of my favorite chapters to do. Okay. In the adrenal cortex, there's 3 layers. The deepest layer, closest to the internal portion called the adrenal medulla, is called the zona reticularis, is where these gonadal hormones, the testosterone precursors, come from. And again, and as I probably mentioned before, performance enhancing, that's what the Balco lab did in the Barry Bonds era, in the A-fraud, or A-rod. They got a World Series out of him. I'm happy. You know who's going on the TV crew? The guy was the manager. Who was Philadelphia's manager. Was with the Yankees during a couple of World Series. And what's his name? Catcher. I'll tip my tongue. He's going to be in the broadcast booth with the gang.
Oh, no, I'm actually.
Yeah, you have to look it up. And he would, as a catcher, he would run up the first base line on every play thrown to the first base bag.
Oh, Paul O'Neill?
No, that's O'Neill's. He's in the booth. He's the guy who used to be the manager. During that 09 World Series run.
It's on.
I know.
Once I look at it, it's gonna.
You go nuts.
Yeah. Joe Torre?
No.
No, God. Who is it?
It wasn't Casey Stengel. Joe Girardi.
Joe Girardi.
I started watching Yankees. It was Casey,
Yeah.
who was the first manager for the comedic Mets. Back when they started.
Yeah.
So, and he would race up the first base line every play to the first base. Yeah, Paul O'Neill was a great outfit, but he's joined the booth. I started listening to Yankee broadcasts. They had
John Sterling was John Sterling there?
yeah, he wasn't there then. He was doing the Braves broadcasts on TBS when they were in the early days,
Yeah.
and with Skip Carey and a couple other guys, and then he basically was recruited by the Yankees. Here's go. And Red Barber, who was the Dodgers, famous Dodgers broadcaster during the Vin Scully, where he started. Red Barber was the lead broadcaster. Phil with the Scooter, Phil Rizzuto, very famous Yankee, Hall of Fame, shouldn't be, but he's a Hall of Famer. MVP in 1950. And Mel Allen, who would do in World War II, he did all of the voices and stuff they sent to the recruits. He had a wonderful voice. His name, Jewish guy named Melvin Allen Israel, but he went by Mel Allen. And Phil, best friend was Yogi Berra. They both were in Elizabeth, New Jersey. They sent their kids to the same school. Little sports history. Lena, you should be into that. Who's your favorite team? Baseball team.
I don't really keep up with MLB that much. I like watching football.
Who you like in the game?
Steelers.
Yeah, I know. Who do you like for the Super Bowl?
For the Super Bowl? Well, I like the 49ers, but I hate the Chiefs. But the 49ers are going to be close to us in the Super Bowls, right? They're going to tie.
Yeah.
And so I don't want that either.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of neutral in it. But I really don't like the Chiefs.
My wife's not going to be happy with you.
So the Chiefs
She likes
win.
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
His dad that was his third DUI.
Yeah, I saw that. Just saw that.
I mean, he was a very average pitcher for the Yankees, for the Pirates. He was okay, but he was a starter that was give you a good game, give you a bad game, journeyman, effectively. But I mean, Bob Walk used to talk about him all the time. So I remember Bob Walk when he was a rookie with the Phillies because he came in 1980 and he was part of the '83 winning team. Because they were showing Pirates. A lot of times, Sportsnet shows like old Pirates and old Penguins games. And my mother-in-law at 97, she's a sports nut, so she's enjoyed watching those. Okay, moving on. So enough of me with this. Let's get to the gist of Price or Start here. Trying to find the reproductive nugget. Oh, this is awful. Oh, maybe it's the wrong one. Hold on. I wanted to give this to you. I know we're running out of time, and I'd rather do the questions, but you got to have the background stuff. It's here. Let me see if I can grab that. You're looking for the chapters in this. Likely week 8. Food and electrolyte. Repro. That's respiratory. Yeah. Oh, it'll be here anyway, because we did them both. Because male and female. See if I can get this a little bit, because we did the anatomy, of course. Cancer, treatment, this. Okay. It's there. You've got it previously. You have folks have it on your the PowerPoints. And so it's week 4 because I just did the anatomy PowerPoints are the same. And I would please review this stuff. Okay. So it gives you an idea of the role that it plays in the development of the primary to secondary. I think it's important because we're not going to do this till the end of the term. Okay. Big players. Primary oocytes arrested in prophase 1. Okay. Substantial amounts. Okay. Okay. Somehow a dominant follicle, typically its opposite sides, are part of it. Again, the formation of polar bodies, if you review your material. Okay. Secondary oocytes, when they are ovulated, okay, metaphase 2. It's the completion of meiosis that occurs more or less around the time of fertilization, okay? If penetrated by a sperm, it quickly completes meiosis 2, yielding that second polar body degenerates. That's an important nugget for all of this. So you notice all of those stages, I think, because to me, those are factors that they customarily look at on the MCAT. Less about some of the other stuff. If it helps you solve some of these passage problems, then we've been successful. Different phases, preantral, antral, and they're summing these up. The interesting thing, again, luteal surge, becoming the corpus luteum, which we looked at previously, okay? The different follicles, and again, granulus condensed to form theca folliculi, secrete hormone in response to LH, and eventually you get the development. So that secondary follicle, effectively, as it accumulates within it, and that cavity with fluid called the antrum, and that's, so when you see that, that really is the distinguishing part. So now you have a vesicular follicle, and they had different, they called it a Graafian follicle with a capital G, and different phase. And again, it enlarged, and again, we see the term corona radiata for radiating crown, okay, that we see it fairly frequently in a lot of areas, and it's ready to be ovulated. That's that. And then once it is, the corpus luteum formation. So look through that. Now they look at the phases and what goes on. So understand that it's one particular follicle stimulated by FSH. Why does this occur? Okay, because at the end of menstruation, effectively, we still are going to we'll have levels that start to have effectively lowered, which led to menstruation, which will cause the GnRH to be secreted by the posterior pituitary, and we begin to produce FSH and LH, and the different roles. FSH all about the ovary level, and then gradually increasing levels of progesterone in an effort to start to rebuild the bed in the uterus, and to really to play somewhat of a developmental role at the ovarian level. Okay, and again, whatever follicles there are, the dominant one and the other ones undergo atresia and effectively disappear. Here we are, secondary oocyte, first polar body. I went through all that before. The typical mid-cycle pain, German was Mittelschmerz. And again, that was a signal, vis-a-vis back in the old days when they were trying to have children, that would be the opportunity to do that. And then the nugget about fraternal versus, identical twins versus what we used to call, now we call them conjoined twins. Now it's pejorative. Siamese twins. I don't know where they came up with that name. And then the corpus luteum, and then the whole idea of the phases. So if no pregnancy occurs, 10 days, and that's why we have such a fixed time for that second phase. And then 2 to 3 days in the luteolytic when it's deteriorating, and it coincides with the endometrium. So this is an interesting nugget as well. I have a little bit of time, a few minutes left. So the ovaries secrete small amounts of estrogen, and so there's enough to stop GnRH. This is the key issue. You have to have, leptin is produced by fat cells. So the tragedy is when there's insufficient fat in a female who is about to enter puberty, you can intentionally delay it. I will tell you the anecdote when we get there. It has to do with an ice skating. Maybe I told you before. And I always tell it again because it was a gal my daughter skated with. And so why at particular levels it becomes less sensitive, and as long as there's adequate leptin, then the GnRH is released, and it's almost released very, very rapidly. Okay, comparatively, and you begin to develop that adult cyclic pattern. And so, again, all of this, the LH contributes to follicle growing, and at the same time, it's starting to prepare the bed for implantation. Okay. So increasing levels of those, okay, will inhibit, and the granulosa cells surrounding the follicle that's developing this inhibit. So only the dominant follicle can withstand that drop in follicle stimulating hormone. That's where the atresia or the basically the involution or the elimination of those other follicles that may have started to develop. So the estrogen levels continue to rise, okay, from the dominant follicle, and then for whatever, and this is the unique thing, okay, that luteal surge has to do with a particular critical level, okay, and again, there's a certain amount of inconsistency in when it occurs timing wise throughout the first portion of the menstrual cycle, but it triggers, and again, this is the oddball, another positive feedback loop. We see both with oxytocin and now here with this, we see these evidence of positive feedback. You see it, other than blood clotting, is if the answer is positive feedback or it's about positive feedback and it's not blood clotting, if you got an answer that's got female repro, even if you don't remember it, that's a good default choice. Again, just tricks of the trade, so to speak. Okay, stored, and the LH has been stored, so you get that luteal surge and ovulation occurs. Okay, local vascularity, all that type of stuff we'll go over when we do this. Estrogen levels decline, the transformation of the corpus luteum, and then once it finally, and then it's much more estrogen based, pre-ovulatory, much more progesterone based, post ovulatory. In pregnancy, then we have a marriage of the two that are there. Let's stop it here. Okay. We will get to the questions. So if you didn't get a chance to do them, let's do them. I'll tell Dr. Hillwig. So I'll come back on Friday if you permit me.
I wanna be here Friday.
Good. I mean, oh darn. Where are you going to be?